George Orwell's dystopian novel 1984 imagined a ministry of truth that issued nothing but lies, distortions and propaganda. That description pretty much sums up the billionaire-owned British media, which has spent the past week or couple of weeks foaming at the mouth about the supposed left-wing bias of the BBC, when any honest assessment shows the exact opposite. The BBC has been thrown into a political crisis following the resignations of Director General Tim Davie and head of BBC News Deborah Turness. But this crisis has been manufactured by the right-wing media establishment, spearheaded by the Daily Telegraph, in a deliberate effort to undermine one of the last remaining public services in Britain. At the centre of the storm is a leaked memo given to the Telegraph, criticising the BBC's news coverage. It was written by Michael Prescott, a former Sunday Times journalist who worked as an external advisor alongside Robbie Gibb, a member of the BBC Editorial Guidelines and Standards Committee. As Deadline has reported, Gibb was a nakedly political appointment by Boris Johnson. Before that, he served as Theresa May's Director of Communications, acted as an editorial advisor for GB News, and openly described himself as a Thatcherite conservative in an interview with the Taxpayers Alliance. Until last year, he was also a director at the Jewish Chronicle, which during his tenure retracted articles after fabricating quotes from Israeli officials, as reported by Middle East Eye. This background matters because it shows exactly how contrived this whole operation is. Reports from within the BBC suggest Gibb was instrumental in pushing Prescott's memo, which claimed to expose examples of left-wing bias, but in reality read like a collection of personal, baseless opinions. On racism, it dismissed a BBC report on ethnic minorities paying higher car insurance premiums as ill-researched, even though there is research by the University of Bristol and the campaign Fair by Design found people in more ethnically diverse areas were indeed quoted premiums around 20% higher. On immigration, Prescott complained that the BBC wasn't issuing enough push notifications about rising migration without providing any evidence. On transgender coverage, he accused the BBC of being too one-sided, even though a simple Google search shows the corporation repeatedly covered the very case he claimed it ignored. In fact, the BBC has regularly platformed anti-trans voices, while a Vice report revealed that LGBTQ staff had quit over the corporation's hostile coverage. A secretly filmed meeting in 2021 showed members of the BBC's internal Pride network openly expressing frustration at how trans issues were handled. Prescott also accused the BBC of bias over Gaza, targeting the BBC Arabic service. Yet any objective look at BBC output over the past 2 years reveals one of the most disgraceful pro-Israel biases in modern British journalism. Analyses have been published and largely ignored by the media, with no demands for resignations from the Telegraph or anyone else. Owen Jones, in his Battle Lines report and on YouTube, pointed out that the BBC Arabic service only appears sympathetic to Palestinians because the corporation's overall coverage has leaned heavily towards Israel's narrative. Hardly surprising given that the BBC's Middle East news desk is run by Rafi Berg, a self-declared admirer of Mossad. A detailed report by the Centre for Media Monitoring, published in June, exposed an extraordinary level of bias. Even though Gaza suffered vastly more casualties, Israeli deaths received disproportionately greater coverage. Emotive language was used for Israelis far more frequently. Genocide allegations against Israel were shut down by presenters in over 100 cases, while Israeli officials' own genocidal statements, such as Netanyahu's Amalek reference, went completely unmentioned, and Palestinian voices were consistently marginalised. The study examined 3,873 BBC articles and more than 32,000 broadcast segments from the 7th of October 2023 to the 7th of October 2024. These findings were launched at a parliamentary event attended by MPs and Richard Burgess, the BBC's Director of News Content. Former Daily Telegraph political commentator Peter Oborne delivered a blistering takedown of Burgess's defence of BBC coverage. The footage exists, but almost nowhere in the British media was this discussed or reported. Meanwhile, the BBC continues to defend its Middle East editor Rafi Berg, who is now suing Owen Jones for reporting on the BBC's failures over Gaza. This is a senior BBC figure using the courts to silence scrutiny, and the BBC's refusal to air its own commissioned documentary Medics in Gaza, later broadcast by Channel 4, was yet another capitulation to pro-Israeli pressure. The controversy controversy that has dominated the headlines, however, is Donald Trump threatening a $1 billion lawsuit against the BBC over a Panorama episode in which clips of him were edited in a misleading order. The mistake was real, but the broader point remains true. Trump did encourage the assault on Congress and repeatedly lied about the election. Facing his legal threats, the BBC has issued grovelling apologies. Yet the broadcaster has a long track record of misleading edicts, including reversing footage of the 1984 Battle of Orgreave during the miners' strike to make it appear that miners provoked the police charge when the opposite was true. The truth is that the BBC has an entrenched right-wing bias, shaped by its leadership and culture, dominated by people from elite backgrounds and former Tory communications staffers. It was central in undermining Jeremy Corbyn, especially over anti-Semitism, and its pro-Israel slant continues to be a national disgrace. But for the right-wing press, even that isn't enough. They want wholesale privatisation, delivering the corporation into the hands of the same billionaire owners who dominate the rest of the media. That is the real purpose behind the current coup. Boris Johnson hasn't hesitated to exploit the moment, urging the public to stop paying the TV licence, despite the fact he helped engineer this crisis by pushing for Gibbs' appointment and for Prescott's rise within the BBC. The BBC's Royal Charter is up for renewal in 2027, and a debate is beginning about the future of public broadcasting. Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy has defended the BBC in part, but her past comments on the licence fee being deeply regressive hint at a dangerously soft stance on subscription funding. These kinds of political signals only embolden the privatisation agenda. Socialists must assess the BBC from a class standpoint. For all its public service dressing, it is deeply rooted in the British capitalist establishment. It acts as a defensive wall against left-wing criticism and protects the system it represents. Restoring public trust means breaking its ties to the establishment, electing a governing body accountable to viewers and listeners, involving trade unions representing BBC workers, and ensuring that political coverage reflects genuine support rather than personal connections or ideological favouritism. Farage should not have a season ticket to BBC Studios while other political voices are sidelined. For all its bias in news and current affairs, the BBC remains the most read news outlet in the UK, with 40 million users, according to Ipsos and the Press Gazette. Its natural history programming, children's content and drama remain world-class. Allowing the corporation to be privatised would only cement its pro-establishment bias under billionaire ownership, while dumbing down everything else it produces. The answer is democratisation, not the destruction of the BBC. Thank you very much for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and also head over to www.lefthorizons.com to subscribe to the newsletter and read the full article on the website. You can also listen to it on Spotify or any podcast platform of your choice by visiting the link in the description below. We shall see you in the next video. Bye for now.